All right. Welcome, everyone. It's good to have you with us. We are talking now with Clody. She is about to share some things that she's seeing. And just to give you a few minutes before we brought in the wider audience, we were talking about if you read these sources separately, like if you read the E source all the way through, and then you read the J source all the way through, at least as people have presented them in the academic understanding, you do see certain things that click and certain things make sense. So I'm going to let Clody take over in a minute, but she was just describing, and I noticed this too, that if you read, so for instance, what happened at Shechem? Well, if you read one story, it's very, very bad in that Dinah is, according to some people's understanding, at least forced into a relationship with Hamor. But in another case, and then Shechem is obtained when when Levi and Simeon go in and they whack everybody up with swords. And that's how they end up with Shechem. But then another source says that it went totally peacefully. So I know that that's maybe not exactly what you're saying, Clody, but go ahead from there and get us back on track.
Yeah, so this was like a parenthesis as to how you can understand different things from different sources.
Yeah.
And so from there, I read the wrestling with God.
Yep.
Different, separately the E sources from the P and from the J sources.
Yep.
And I don't know. Yesterday evening, we were chatting during the welcoming Shabbat.
Yep.
And I noticed how you were saying that the Bible says he was wrestling with a man.
Right.
So as I was reading again this morning, the Elohistic,
Yep,
narrative on that, I started reading something. I hope I don't annoy you, but I'm gonna share this.
You go ahead. You won't annoy me, I promise.
Okay, bear with me.
All right.
So, I was thinking that the man that was wrestling with Jacob might be one of Esau's fighters.
Okay.
And we see this one. Why do I say that? Because we see this one-to-one encounter even in David and Goliath's case. So before the battle was on hand between Jacob's people and the 400 from Esau's camp, the 400 men from Esau's camp, perhaps this encounter was before the battle would begin.
Okay.
Just like David and Goliath.
Yeah, send out your best fighter kind of thing.
Yeah. Exactly. And when he says, when the man says, you strove with God and man, these and prevailed, this might have had a literal meaning. Like Judah, not Judah, wait, what have I written here? Jacob stole Esau's birthright, given to Esau from God, so he strove with God. And also he strove with man because Laban, he strove with his brother and with Laban, who wanted to give him Leah, but then again he took Rachel altogether.
Yep.
So I think that this might have a literal meaning. Nothing with an angel of God telling him that you fought with an angel of God.
Okay.
Also, Jacob says, I have seen God face to face. And this could be some kind of expression similar to saw death in the eye. Mm-hmm. When we say I saw death in the eye, or I saw my life pass in front of my eyes, we don't mean that all the life flew there.
Yeah.
It's an expression. So it could be I saw God face to face, like it was a very difficult fight, but he prevailed. So I opened ChatGPT and I asked about this, and ChatGPT wrote, often understood the I have seen God face to face. This is an expression often understood as a metaphor for experiencing God's presence and knowing. Now, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So, often understood as a metaphor for experiencing God's presence and knowing Him completely rather than a literal visual sight. It signifies a deep personal relationship with God where one fondly understands and is known by God, fully understands and is known by Him. With all this being said, that doesn't exclude God's intervenience, though. So yes, this might have been a man, a fighter of Esau, or even Esau, or whatever the commentaries say that that exclude the angel of God or Jehovah himself. But anyways, this is an intervenience from God, because we see that Jacob has been changed. Jacob has been transformed.
Yep.
And after all this, we understand that he prevailed. And the other thing is that this person, I didn't know. One question: what was it etymologically Israel's meaning?
It is believed to mean, and this is sort of a folk 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 etymology. It supposedly means one, he strove, Sarah, Sin Resh Hey, with L. He who strives with L, or fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I saw from Google,
Okay.
I'm not the linguist here, it was Israel meant Tsar is a prince or leader.
Yep.
And if this is the case, then Israel, this person that strove with Jacob, could easily have named him, you are not a Jacob, you are Israel, because you are a prince of God, fighting with all things that you had in front of you, and then prevailing and becoming a mighty family.
Yep.
In this moment. And what else? Yeah, I wanted also to say the Peniel.
Yep.
And I'm closing with this.
That's okay.
Actually, I saw two etymologies of two words. One was Bahar, which is blessing. So Jacob was, because this gave me a big question in my mind. How does Jacob ask blessings from his opponent if he was only a man?
Right.
And then I saw the etymology of Bahar, and at times it was kneeling or breaking down, and this could very well mean that kneel down and just say that I surrender.
Yeah.
To the opponent. Or in Greece it was eυλόγησε, which means tell good words for me. That could be the blessings mean in this case. And also bahar in Turkish means good weather, like springtime/summer.
Yeah.
Which could be the time where all the bad weather season comes to an end, so the good season comes.
Gotcha. I got you.
And so that is why I could see how this could be, that Jacob could ask blessings from this man, other man. And the second one, he says, I saw God face to face, Penuel, and I saw it in Greece. In Greek, it was Phanuel. Phanuel could mean also Fenete o Ilios. So Ilios, El is El for God. Ilios means sun in Greek.
Okay.
The sun. I mean the planet.
Yeah.
The sun.
S-U-N. Yeah.
The sun. So it's when he says I saw God face to face, it is Fenete, which is face. In my language, Albanian, face is the cheek.
Okay.
So when you see something right here in front of you, that could mean Fanuel, and it has a small relation with Fano, Penuel, and I'm like, is this Greek or is this Hebrew? Yeah, these were all my thoughts. I'm sorry it was a little bit mixed, but
No, it's excellent. And
I told them as they came.
No, I appreciate your input, especially as someone who you said, I'm not the linguist. You're the most linguistic person on this panel right now. So, no, I really appreciate that because, if you look at the meaning of these words, a lot of times the names, we read these names and it says, and therefore his name was called. Well, that's clearly a writer in the Hebrew Bible trying to make sense of a name that may or may not have originated in Hebrew. Give you the quick example would be if you look at the name Moshe, it says that she drew him from the water and therefore she called him Moshe, for he was drawn from the water. Well, we know and we've discussed that in Egyptian, so that's if someone wants to say, well, there is this verb in Hebrew that sounds kind of like Moshe, but in Hebrew, in Egyptian, there is a word Mose, which means to be born of or the son of. So this case, instead of Tutmosis or Akmose, one of those names, which means the son of Tut or whoever, you have Mose. You find this baby in the water and you go, who's his daddy? I don't know. It's just it's son, a baby. Yeah. So anyway, so your point about what are these names, Israel, does it mean he fought with God, or is that in this case the E version going back and trying to make sense? He gets this story where there is just a name change. How does it go from Jacob to Israel? And he puts a story together, whereas the P version doesn't have any of that. And some have proposed that the name Israel is tied to the SR sound, which means a prince. So, for instance, the word Sarah, the name Sarah, is understood to be the feminine form of the Hebrew priest.
Leader or prince.
A prince, a leader, a feminine. She's a princess.
There is another case with Benjamin and Benoni. So it's like when Yaakov took his son and they told him that your wife called him Benoni, the son of my pains.
Yeah.
And then Jacob said, what? Not Benoni, he's Benjamin.
Yep.
Which meant the son of the right hand, the son of good fortune.
Right.
So yes, you could be like Benoni, but for me you are not Benoni. From now on you are Benjamin, the son of my right hand. So that might be what? You're not Jacob. You are not Jacob. You are Israel because you are not Jacob anymore. You have been transformed. Yeah,
good stuff.
Thank you.
Hey, stick around. We might need you to come back up. But as I move to the next, I'll get you in 1 second, Nikita. Just a couple of questions because I'm trying to keep up. We've got quite a bit of activity between. We have quite a few here on the Zoom call. We have quite a few watching on YouTube. One of the questions people are asking, I noticed that Holly asked a question. she said very wisely, look, I'm kind of new to this whole thing about the different sources. Where can I get that? Doug, who is very much into this study as well, he and I have exchanged different things. He mentioned Richard Elliott Friedman, The Bible with Sources Revealed. Absolutely, that is a very good source. Just so you know, Seth and I have taken Richard Elliott Friedman's work and incorporated it into our Torah tablets. So what you'll find in these is the same sources indicated in the text as you'll find in Richard Elliott Friedman's work, but I find the colors to be a little distracting. I mean, I have it, so I'm not trying to say no, don't buy his. He's the top scholar in the field in the world. So, but I've incorporated that into these tablets. And by the way, we do have the Exodus tablet is coming out very shortly. I like some of your comments, Clody, that we'll have to come back to. This whole idea of face-to-face. The biblical writers, it depends who you read. Some sources present the biblical writers as that you can see God. But then in other stories, no man can see my face. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Then how is it that Moses can speak to God face to face, literally pay el pay, mouth to mouth, as a man speaks to his neighbor? So, but that's because we have different sources. Now, someone who doesn't recognize the sources says, no, it's just, I know it says that in one place and this and the other, but
we try to interpret things figuratively or symbolically when we tend to do that if we don't understand the source.
That's right.
That's what I understood this morning. Like all the interpretation from our good faith and from our love for God is good and beautiful. But if we go past that and we understand that there are different narrations, that makes an altogether different opening of the mind.
Yep. And imagine, and I know different people are in different places theologically, but let me say one more word about the different sources. If you took the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you pull them together, and some have done this. I've talked to James about this, and they've done this, and then you read the story, you lose a lot of the perspective of the individual sources. You know, you're like, well, that's not, I like mine separate. So if you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that's not my specialty, but I've spent a lot of time, like many of you have. I know that Mark uses a phrase and immediately. You know, it's like you're rushing along. Whereas I know also that Matthew has certain tendencies. Well, here's what we don't have in the Pentateuch. We have what is a later editor's composite that has blended together all these ancient sources. And what happened was individual scholars began to notice traces of these individual authors. Now we can pull those out and separate them and make sense of it. So one question to Holly's point, and something you said, Clody, one thing that I have done already, and Doug has seen this, James has seen it, probably the Tylers, but I took the Pentateuch and I said, give me the Torah according to J. Give it all to me. I just want to read J. I don't want to read JEPD together, just J. And then so I listed J from Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, whatever. Then not Leviticus, but then I go to E and I do that all as one book. So it becomes sort of a source separated document. And Seth asked me the other day, so why don't we go ahead and publish that too, where you just publish just the text. Give me J, give me E, give me P, and give me D. And or put it all together, the Torah broken down by sources. And so we are going to do that as well. And all of these things are going to come out. 2025, I'm making a list now and checking it twice. Of all the things that I'm going to do in the next, and this is going to be the busiest year of my life, God willing. And so get ready. There's a lot coming, and that's one of them. So then, to your point, Clody, you can just open up and read J from beginning to end. Read E beginning to end, and so forth. It's going to be good. Good stuff.
Okay.
All right, stick around. I'm going to get you up for more linguistic stuff. Nikita, Shabbat Shalom, my sister. How are you?
I'm a puddle. Shabbat shalom, my brother. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly well.
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, I love humility. And I want to make sure everyone, hopefully everyone's here from last night. When I said that Jacob was wrestling with the angel and he knew the angel to be that, I was wrong. And I have never been so happy let me take that back because I'm wrong a lot. I've never been so happy to be able to apologize for my misspoken words. Because last night after we got off, I got the nagging and I was like, okay, reevaluate. So I go back to the text and I read in the earlier part of that chapter about Jacob with the angels or messenger. I carried that thought over to the ending part with the wrestling.
Yep.
Which that I should not have done. And I always tell people who I'm learning with, don't make assumptions about the text. And there I was, I did that.
Oh, I do it too.
So
I got to catch myself too. You're in good company. This is what this is all about, is dig deep and keep digging.
Yes, but in humility, I have to. I love that. That's why I was like, and we just talked last week, don't deify man or man's ideas, humanize man and deify the Most High. So in my humanness, I must I do understand and have reevaluated what I said. So please scratch that from my record. That led me to, blessed be the Most High in his glorious ways, Genesis chapter 4, 6, and 7.
I'm listening. Genesis 4, 6, and 7.
Yes.
All right.
Where it says, and the Lord said unto Cain, why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance falling? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted. And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Okay, so you might think, why is that important? There's the wrestling. There's a wrestling. Okay, because Cain is wrestling with what he wants to do to his brother and the sacrifices, why is mine not accepted? And the Most High is like, look inside yourself. Look inside yourself. Sin lieth at the door. You don't have to be overcome by it. You can overcome it. Okay? That goes back to what you were saying, how it's a story within a story.
Yeah.
So you read it chronologically, you read it as it's printed in the text, but as in Exodus 33 and 18, oh my Lord, forgive me. I hope I'm not rambling too much, but it's just a whole lot trying to get out and make sense.
Listen, this is a time to ramble, Nikita. Go ahead. We just have to get everybody up. So you don't have 2 hours, but other than that, I want to listen.
Okay. So in Exodus chapter 33, when Moses said, which is a constant prayer of mine, show me your glory.
Yep.
And the Most High puts him in a place and he can see the back of him.
Right.
Everything happens from the garden forward in that same fashion. We either get an overview like chapter 1, and then chapter 2 breaks down the individual days in Genesis. Everything happens as we're looking back at what the Most High has already done and evaluating and seeing his presence there. There's a lot of things that happen that we don't detect while we're going through them. But when we look back, there's that holy hand that's shown us so much. So when someone in the chat, I want to say it was Marianne, if it wasn't you, I'm sorry, I apologize. But she was saying something about the reference that the fighter may have been Esau. So last night when I went back through, it was something important about the fighter that he should not be seen the next morning. Like the day is coming.
Yep.
So I got to get out of here before the day comes. And then I thought about David and Saul, when Saul was laying there sleeping and David had all opportunity to either kill him or jump him. I'm like, well, maybe Esau didn't have that restraint and he just jumped him. He's like, okay, I got to get out of here because I don't want him to see who I am because I've seen him struggle. That was one option. I'm not saying that was what the case was.
Okay.
But whatever it was, and like someone else said in the chat, maybe it was, and Clody said, I believe, and maybe it was a fighter of Esau's.
Yeah.
Because that fighter would know that Esau was his brother because they're twins. Okay, but Jacob would not know who the fighter was, so it wouldn't have mattered if he saw his face, unless he knew he would be Esau's right hand man, and when they met the next day, Jacob may recognize him from the night
All
before.
right, let me jump in. I want to ask. So, do you think that the wrestler, the one with whom Jacob is wrestling, who is that? And I'm not cutting you off. I want to make sure I'm taking notes because I'm keeping track. Do you think that it is an angel, a heavenly messenger, or do you think it is Esau, or who do you think it is? Who do men say that this is, Nikita?
Well, like I said, it could be Esau or it could be a representative of the Most High. But for me, and this came this morning when you were talking about how old these guys were.
Yeah.
For me, it would be Jacob. Jacob was wrestling with Jacob. Because when I get up in the morning, something's always out of joint due to my age.
All right.
And that was a joke part.
I hear
But
you.
when I was just, like I said, when you look back, you see the Most High. And I just had this conversation with a friend of mine this week. You know how people have the angel on one shoulder and the devil and God on the
I hear
devil
you.
on the other shoulder?
Yep.
Well, I have the voice of the Most High, and I have Nikita on the other shoulder. My devil's been on vacation since I was born. He hadn't had nothing to do because
No
it's
input.
always how I feel about what I know I should do. That's the wrestle. It's about how I feel with what the Most High has told me to do. Before I got to a place where I was more compliant, it was always, for some reason, the Most High doesn't know the whole story, and I got to do it my way.
Yeah.
Because we want to justify our actions and with some spin of righteousness. But the opposite is always true. He knows everything. That's why he can tell you, don't steal, because you're going to automatically start the cycle of events to where you're going to repent to that. Now, whether we submit to the repentance like, David submitted to his, or we're going to fight against it and be bitter, angry, wondering why the Most High when he already told us what or what not to do.
I got you. Look, you know what I feel? I think that you're going to have to go out to the street corner today and preach like I told you last week. You're in that. I can feel it. Good stuff. I appreciate you, Nikita. Look. Yep.
Thank you. Just one more thing, and I'll leave you alone for the rest of the day, hopefully.
You don't have to make promises you're not going to keep, but go ahead.
I said hopefully. That gave you a little leeway. That from 33:18 when Exodus 33:18, when Moses said, show me your glory.
Yep.
The Most High's glory is in his revelations and in his truth. And if we can't humble ourselves to see that and make further corrections, then we are wasting his glory. And I pray none of us, as well as myself, ever do that, because my Shabbats are spent in, mostly 75% of it is spent in the reflections of the past week. And then 25% is for the future, for the week coming. That's why I see the glory of the Most High. That's why I'm so happy when we get to this day, because I've looked back where I may have not consciously noticed because I was going through it at the time, and I see the beauty of his hand on my life. That's what this whole past week is. That's what every week has been.
I hear you.
Let me be honest. That's what the whole past week has been. Just a whole shout of praise to the Most High for what he has shown me. So as I say in my greetings or salutations in closings with most people, may you all have a revelational Shabbat. May you all have a revelational day at the end of every day where you can look back and say, thank you, Almighty Most High, for what you have done for me and shown me to improve myself in your will.
Good
stuff.
Have
a great blessing, my brother.
Hey, I appreciate you, Nikita. And look, stay tuned, because I hope you get to come to our conference. We'll talk more about that in the next few weeks, but I need to meet you face to face. So, and that ties in with our tour portion, by the way. Look, I appreciate you, Nikita. I'm about to bring Damon up. 1 second, Damon. Someone asked about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I know I'm missing a lot of comments here. This is busy today. But I will say that the Dead Sea Scrolls, if you don't have this, the Dead Sea Scroll Bible, the oldest known Bible, translated for the first time into English by Abegg, Flint, and Ulrich. It's English, and it does contain the text that we find among the Dead Sea Scrolls. And in Genesis 32, just so you know, it does have part of the story that we covered today. We have elements from the beginning of 32 where Jacob sends messengers before him to Esau, his brother. So we've got a part of verse 3, 4, and then there's a gap, and we don't see again chapter 32 represented among the Dead Sea Scrolls until we get to verse 29, which is right in the middle of this fight, right, or right after the fight, where Jacob asked him, "Tell me, I pray you, your name." And he said, "Why do you ask after my name?" Etc. So, but anyway, yeah, I would recommend. I know I'm breaking the bank for some of you by telling you all these books to get, but that's a good book. Okay, Damon, Shabbat Shalom. How are you, brother? Boy, I see a lot of names lining up. Go ahead, brother.
Okay, so I don't want to go on too long, but I do have a comment that'll be like a couple of minutes to present, and then I have some thoughts about the wrestling.
Thoughts about what?
So, thoughts about the wrestling.
Okay.
So, this one is kind of a segue because I've been doing some stuff in Isaiah, researching for my book that I'm putting together. But one of the things that you had mentioned both this week and last week is that Padan Aram is Abraham's original home. So it's in Mesopotamia. Okay. And what makes that interesting in terms of Isaiah is actually Isaiah's oracle on Babylon in Isaiah 14, where and I just discovered this as I'm doing the research for the book. Isaiah is actually using a Canaanite myth to describe Lucifer, or Halel in the original Hebrew, and his attempt to claim a throne on the word in Hebrew is Zephon. Most translations have the sides of the north.
Yeah.
But the word in Hebrew is actually Mount Zephon, which is the Canaanite, as it were, cosmic mountain, just like the Greeks have Mount Olympus, which isn't a real mountain. It's where Zeus ruled. Mount Zephon is where Baal ruled. So in the Canaanite myth, this god named Atar, he's the male version of Ishtar, decides that he wants to claim Baal's throne for himself. So he tries to climb Mount Zephon, but instead he's cast down and he ends up ruling the underworld instead. So the way Isaiah puts it is, of course, directed at the king of Babylon.
One quick second, Damon.
Yeah.
Is this in any way tied to the Torah portion? I just want to make sure I'm following where you're going with it.
You'll see where I'm going with it. Yes, it comes back to there.
Okay, and one more question. Do you believe then that Isaiah 14 is talking about? I think, did you say Lucifer? Is that, or do you? Because the text clearly says that. Because the text clearly says it's it has to do with a Babylonian ruler.
That's what I was just getting at.
Okay.
So what Isaiah 14 is doing is it's taking a Canaanite myth about Atar, the god Atar, trying to claim the throne of Baal, and it's applying it to the king of Babylon. Okay. And what I think it's doing is it's taking, as it were, an indigenous myth, because the Babylonians have their own myth and their own cosmic mountain, but it doesn't have anything to do with claiming a throne. Okay. But the Canaanites' myth about a cosmic mountain does. So what I think Isaiah 14 is doing is it's taking an indigenous myth to say, okay, this king of Babylon has a land claim over the throne of God in Jerusalem. That's their rightful throne. Why? Because Jacob came from there originally, from Mesopotamia originally. So it's their family, so it should be their throne. And that's what I'm tying together here. Does that make sense?
I follow where you're going.
So I just thought that was interesting because I think I don't know of very many people who actually understand that that was a Canaanite myth, and then Isaiah was using that Canaanite myth to say something.
Well, I would say when you ask me, does it make sense? I would say I understand that behind a lot of these narratives, we have to understand that there are other ancient Near Eastern stories, and particularly when you're dealing with Baal and El and some of the Canaanite deities and so forth. So now I don't quite make the connection, but that's why we have different people with different insights. I don't quite make the connection between the Torah portion and Jacob and so forth with that particular part of Isaiah, but I'm sure that you can post something and be more, I guess, lay it out a little bit better in our Discord, and then I can follow it better. So,
yeah. And then just briefly in 2 sentences, this was an indigenous myth about basically a land claim saying the Canaanites, it's their original homeland, so they're going to claim the throne for themselves. Except Isaiah's using it about the king of Babylon by saying, oh, that's Babylon's original people, the descendants of Jacob, because that's where they came from, claim that throne for themselves. Does that make sense?
I can't say it does yet, but again, I would remember now. I don't think Padan Aram is to be connected with Babylon. That region is a separate region. Babylon would be now ultimately in the time when the Babylonians ultimately, like we're talking the end of the First Temple period, they would be at least part-time in that region around Padan Aram. But I just honestly, I don't make the connection between the region north of the land where Padan Aram is and Babylon at all. But again, just flesh it out for me, and then I'll read it and see what I think.
Okay. Then switching topics to the wrestling.
Okay.
I don't want to contradict what other people have said before, because when you read a text, it's a living text, and obviously it's going to mean things to you that are very personal. But I would also encourage people to be aware of the ancient Near Eastern context where the gods could walk the earth. I mean, most people are familiar with the Greek myths about Zeus and Zeus fathering children, for instance, with human women. So obviously he's interacting with people on the earth. What the text has is it has angels walking around on the earth, and they're interacting with people. And I think that the interaction with Jacob here in Genesis 32, where Jacob literally wrestles with an angel, is just an example of that, which is something that would be very familiar to people of that ancient Near Eastern culture, but not necessarily so familiar to people today. The other thing is Genesis, I believe it's 15:1, makes a point of calling the word of the Lord, which John 1 says, oh, that's Jesus. Jesus is the word of the Lord. So if we're going to say that that angel that Jacob saw is God, it would be because that's the word, if that makes sense. In other words, the messenger of God who is also God.
That was one of the things that I brought up to Carolyn. Is there is an interesting book if someone is inclined to look at texts like John 1 and the incarnation and so forth. And I'm sure that Dr. Tabor may have others to recommend, but I recommended earlier, I don't know if James was on, James Dunn, Christology in the Making. I think that you'll find a lot of that, and I think a lot of people have, they make the connection. In fact, I got an email earlier this week that said, hey, I have a question. Is Jacob wrestling with Jesus and, this pre-incarnate Christ? Again, those are, at least in my view, they're outside of my field, first of all, of expertise. But I would highly recommend that someone immerse themselves in the work of people like Dunn, at least to cover all the basic texts from the ancient to the modern times and how we understand that. So good stuff. All right. I appreciate you, Damon. And Betty Elisheva. There you are. Let me unmute you. There you go. Oh, I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, thank you. Hey, Shabbat Shalom,
Shabbat Shalom.
everybody.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I always enjoy class, but this one was especially good. I When I read text in the Bible, I I I believe that we are to try to learn from our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look for things that I can learn in my own personal life. And I think this is a good example with the wrestling that Jacob did with whether it's an Ish, whether it's a Malak, whether it's God. Um, the thing about it is that it occurred in the darkness. He was probably afraid, scared. He didn't know what was going to happen, and that's why he stayed behind. Um, and, I think we all have these fears and these struggles when things come to us and we have a choice and we don't really know what to do. Sometimes we want to run away
Yeah.
because things seem bad. I'm sure Jacob was probably thinking about all of the mistakes that he had made previously and didn't want to repeat them.
Yeah.
But what did he do? He decided to stay and to persevere. And he decided to face it. And I think that's a good lesson for us that we always have a choice. And so he did. He made the right choice and he persevered and he wrestled. And he prevailed. He won. That doesn't mean that he didn't have the consequences, because we always have consequences for our actions. But we can still persevere and wait for the light to appear. And the light did appear in the morning. And I think that, when God created the world, the first thing that he created out of the darkness was light. And he set a precedent that light always follows the darkness. And so that's what Jacob saw the light at the end, and it was morning, and he prevailed and he won. So I just think that's a good lesson for us. I mean, there's a lot more to this story than just that, but
I get
thought
it.
that was interesting.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, I love it too. I've had to apply it
Yeah.
many times over and over in my life when I want to just ignore something and run away and not deal with it. But it keeps coming back to me until I decided, okay, Betty, you've got to face this. There's no, there's no getting out of it. This is your life. What are you going to do?
Right.
Oh, anyway, I think we can all be winners as long as we know that the Most High, the Eternal One, is always with us, in us, and will guide us if we seek after Him with all our heart.
Yeah, I love the idea. Going along with what you're describing there, Betty, it's that Jacob begins with prayer. He's faced
Yes.
with all these troubles, and I think it's important to, I made this comment earlier. I mean, the whole story, we know, the reader knows everything that's coming, or we don't know everything. We do now because we read it all the time, but when you read it the first time, you don't know, is Jacob, he's going to meet Esau. Oh my goodness, this could be horrible. But Jacob, Jacob does go to God in prayer before any of this happens. And notice it, I love this too. It says he was alone. Jacob was
Yes.
alone, and then it goes, and there wrestled with him. I can't tell you, I know that all of you can relate, how many times I've felt totally alone when the problems are right around the corner, and you're scared, you're anxious, you don't know what's going to happen, and the only thing you have is to go to God in prayer. And I think that that's a good lesson. Beyond J.E. and academic views of the text, these things still strike me deep at the core. It's go to God. So
Absolutely. I agree totally and identify with feeling completely alone.
yeah.
But yet, are we really alone? No, we're not.
Right.
And if we're physically alone, there's probably a reason why we're alone. And what do we need to learn from being alone? We need to learn to depend on God.
Yep.
That's been the lesson for me because that's where I am right now.
That's
So,
right.
anyway, Baruch Hashem. Thank you for the teaching, and I appreciate everyone's comments. And I really love all of you. And I'm going to stop now because you know me, I'm emotional and I get all teary. So that's it. Thank
All
you.
right. Hey, love you too, Betty. Thanks for being here, and hang around. You might have some more insight for us.
Okay, no, thanks. Bye.
All righty. Todd and Angel, how are you, my friend? My friends. Let me make that plural. My friends. How are you?
And howdy to everybody on the call.
Howdy, howdy.
As usual, you got my brain going again.
That's good.
That's a dangerous thing.
Oh, there we go. Now the truth comes out.
There we go. Leave it to the woman.
That's right.
Something you brought up was interesting. When you were talking about, even though Jacob was changed to Israel, they still used Jacob, which I thought was interesting. But they didn't do that with Abraham.
Right.
So here's the first thing I thought of was, it was always, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why didn't you say Israel?
Yep. Good point.
It's always referenced like that. They give Abraham his second name, but they don't give Jacob his second name.
Yep.
That's interesting.
It is interesting.
And not only that, but where you showed that there's two different places where he changed his name from Jacob to Israel. I think since the second time it's a priestly source, I think that pretty much proves there's a documentary hypothesis going on there.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you, brother. I mean, when I first heard about the documentary hypothesis and the way academics viewed the text, I felt like I was a little nervous to even look at it because I had a certain preconceived idea. You know, who cares what a scholar thinks about this text? God told Moses, Moses wrote it down. That's the way I thought. But then when you look at cases like I'm trying to bring out in this series, where you have Genesis 32, verse 27 and 28, and you compare that to Genesis 35, verse 10, you look at them side by side, it's the same story told in a different way. It makes sense. It doesn't. Look, you don't have to take away from anything that you believe, because what is the source seems to be that the name was changed. The question is, isn't it okay to have different sources telling us that? And that is the case. I'm like you, Todd. This is one of those things that when I saw it, I said, oh yeah, that's it. I mean, there are clearly two different sources. Genesis 35 does not know that 32 verse 27 and 28 just happened. Just doesn't know it.
Yeah. It definitely makes you scratch your head. That's for sure.
Yep.
But on a lighter note, though, we were laughing at you when you said he must have had him in a headlock, give him a wet willy.
Oh yeah. I regret some of the things I say sometimes, but I get on a roll and I don't know.
Well, I told her I disagree with you on that. I think he had him in the headlock, give him a noogie.
That was what I was trying to think of. But there's clearly a wrestling match going on, and it's interesting when you read it, especially if you look at the opponent as perhaps an angel, a malak, a messenger, whatever that means. And I know the difference in the different language, but he says, "I'm not going to let you go," meaning like I'm going to hold you until you bless me. And I think that's we often read through the story and like you think that, like I asked John was here a few minutes ago, and he said, well, maybe the Malak let Jacob win, like he threw the fight. It was just to prove the point. And the text does not present it that way. It's not like I'm going to let you win. He actually prevails. He is unable, the Malak is unable to stop the fight. He's unable to prevail, and yet Jacob prevails. So read it however you want, whether it's Esau or Esau's messenger or an angel, but he had him locked up. He wouldn't let him go.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how you open that up too in the class about the different theologies of that as far as who the angel was.
Yeah.
You know, for a while ourselves, up till I don't know, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, whatever, we thought it was Yeshua too,
Yeah.
and because we were in that theory of he was all in the Old Testament, and you know every time it says angel of Yahuwah, whatever, you know, that's him. Everything. And we've learned a little more since then, but still, it's just interesting, like you were saying, different theologies,
Yeah.
and you know everybody's in a different walk, and everybody learns things different ways and at
And
different times.
And the fun about what we're doing here is I know that among the nearly 100 people who are with us right now, there are people in different places now with this, you know, and they might
Yeah.
be listening and say, well, I heard Ross say, or I had heard Clody say, or I heard Todd say, and I don't agree with that. Well, the whole point of this discussion is to allow those different views to come out and let's talk about it. It really isn't to critique, but, you know, I would have loved something like this 20 years ago where I could have said, "Ooh, I like what Todd said, or I like what Clody, or I like what Nikita said." It helps us because we all bring to this discussion decades of study. And I just appreciate the different insights where we're at. So,
Yeah, well, that's not only how you learn, but it's also how you expand in your thinking of it.
yeah,
Because what you might agree with on yourself this week, it might change next week.
that's right.
You never know, because there could be one thing you read, you'd be like, oh, I might have been wrong.
And
There you
we
go.
all bring our own experiences and our own way of viewing the world and our own way of viewing the Bible to the discussion.
Yeah. No, that's right, Angel. And we, whenever that happens and we allow that discourse to take place, I think it does really, you know, no one in here, we don't have many novices, somebody who just bought a Bible at a garage sale and they decided to join us this morning. Most of us have spent our life looking at these texts and wrestling with God. I mean, that is such an amazing idea, and I think it fits so many of us. So,
Yeah. Well, that's
good
all I
stuff.
got.
What else, Angel?
That's all I've got to.
All right. Hey, thank
That's something you
y'all.
don't hear very often.
Oh, well, she's going to put the mute on and she'll tell you what she's really thinking in just a
That's
minute.
right.
All right. Thank y'all. Stick around. You might have more insight for us. And Karen Clark. How are you, Karen? Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and now I can see you.
Okay. I have a question. So, could we consider Moses a malach? Because he goes to Pharaoh and he gives a message to Pharaoh from God. He's a messenger from God.
He is in that sense a messenger. The question that I would always ask, and this is just because I'm very picky, and I know you are too, he's not, I can't think off the top of my head that he's called a messenger, but that doesn't mean that he's not functioning in that capacity. You know, a lot of times people have said, you know, is Moses a Messiah? And he's not really that, certainly, but a messenger, he certainly brings a message, doesn't he?
Yeah. And then I was going to kind of draw another parallel to that is when Moses is going to go and tell the people and Pharaoh all the stuff that God's told him to say to them, he says, they're going to ask me what your name is. What do I tell them?
Oh, yeah.
And he says, you're going to say that you can tell them Yud Hey Vav Hey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Jacob is wrestling with a man, but a man sent by God. And I think the text supports that.
Okay.
Because, God could have come to some strong guy in a dream and said, I want you to go to this field and find this guy, have a little wrestling match with him.
Scuff him up a little bit.
And the guy's like, well, I don't want him coming after me. If he asks me what my name is, what do I tell him? So we can tell him your name is wonderful. Okay. And I think the text, supports that kind of discourse, that kind of thing going on. So in a sense, Jacob is, he is wrestling with a messenger from God. And I guess you could consider that wrestling with God. But he's also a man.
Yeah. Do you think the text is it Esau, or who do you think it is at this point? Have you given that thought to identify the man?
I don't think it really matters. I mean, I don't think it's Esau, but it could be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just someone that God went to and who was receptive, and he said, "Go rough Jacob up." And
I got a guy. I want you to scuff him up a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
And and again, I think the text supports that because there are other people in the text that God says, "Go take a message to somebody. Go do this. Go do that." He tells Samuel, "Go to find this guy named Jesse. Go to his house, anoint one of his sons as king." And Samuel's like, "Well, how am I going to know who it is?" And
Yep.
I think he says, you know him when you know him, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so he meets all the sons, and he's not vibing with any of them. And like, "You got any more?" And he's acting on God's instructions, and he's doing something. And a lot of people in the text do that. So it doesn't seem out of order for that to be going on here.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I think it's an amazing story, and we do get accounts like that. So that's one view. Now, I think that it almost depends. There's certainly an element in some of the writers behind some of the pens or quills. We do see there is a higher identity than a man. At least it appears, like in Hosea. But you could say, well, Hosea might be a poetic type view, so maybe it's not intending to say, well, literally it's an angel or literally it's God. But Hosea is interesting. Now, I've always, and I'm going to get your input on this or whatever else and then bring Tabor up. But here's the question. In Hosea 12, I really had tied together the striving with God or the angel and the prevailing, the weeping, supplication, and that the one who spoke with us was Jehovah of hosts. I put all that together years ago, and I said, well, that's the writer here is saying that he's wrestling with Jehovah of hosts. Now we can get into Zechariah and how some of that ties into that too, but it is interesting that those are different places. The wrestling with God happens at Penuel, and the weeping happens at Bethel. So I don't know. Did any of that strike you?
Yeah, I have a hard time with heavenly hosts.
Yeah.
I think that they exist in our imagination and in our dreams. So I'm not saying they're not real.
Yeah.
But as far as a physical embodiment, I have a really hard time with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I got you.
I don't know.
You're a terrestrial girl.
I don't know.
Hey, be careful now. This whole alien thing, this might be a whole nother class next week. I hadn't watched the news a whole lot, but I don't know, man. Next week you might be coming out with a different view on those aliens.
Yeah. I know there are some passages in the Bible I just can't. And this might be New Testament, but we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and no. We wrestle against flesh and blood. It's evil men, or even yourself. You're wrestling against your own psyche. You are, like Betty said, you could, maybe he's fighting. I don't know if he's actually fighting himself, but that's what I do.
Yeah.
I am my own worst enemy. I am my own saboteur. I wrestle against myself more than anything. So, but there is evil in this world.
Yeah.
There are bad, men out there doing bad things for profit. So we are wrestling against men.
Gotcha.
And ideologies, and I mean, you can view those however you want, but and in Daniel, when he says he would have been there earlier, but he had to fight the king of Persia, or whoever's ruling over Persia. I don't know. I don't know.
I've been detained for a while. Yeah, I would have been here sooner.
I don't think that's a spiritual thing, or if it is, it's something else. But yeah, I think I try to strip away the metaphysical from the text and just kind of read it in the world in which it was written.
I hear you. You and I are on the same page there. Let's get back to the sources.
Thank you.
All
That's
right.
it.
Hang tight. Now, James, I'm going to bring you up in a minute. We're going to tell our YouTube audience goodbye. Sorry to let you go, but this is a perfect breaking point. Some of you are part of the Yachad. Come on over to the Zoom call, and this way, because James has got some stuff to say. So join us on the Zoom call, and we will see the rest of you next week. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Dr. Tabor.